observe their approach is kind of what I'd ask you to do. My name's Laurel Clinton. I'm a local activist and mother of 3 sons. We spent our entire life living and working in Iowa. And I'm a widowed mother. I lost my husband 10 years ago, so I feel a little more guarded than I did when my dad was here. So having to see my children who have not had any interaction with the law, this being the first, and how it changed his personality, it changed our family structure even more because he left the state, simply because he was being continually harassed. Is this the first video or the second?
The first.
Are you gonna show the second?
No, we just.
Okay. First is equally as scary. It creates a trauma. So I don't want to give you preconceived notions about the way I feel. I kind of want to see how you feel going through it, and kind of just think about if maybe this was a loved one of yours that had to endure this, and how maybe it would affect you. That's kind of where I'm coming from. My activism, unfortunately, did not begin with this stop. We happen to be already in the trenches about these particular things. This happened to come up as we were protesting some of the things we saw happening with our police department. And through some of our activism, we've actually had some wins that have gone on through the city to improve the way they interact with the public. So some positive things have come out of this incident, in spite of the trauma that it created to our family. So if you'll go ahead and watch, get some questions ready for me, I can try to give you some background on where we've been and where we're going. Anything now so far?
Did this happen in Iowa?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And where were your son? Where was
They were leaving a public park. It was dusk. I don't know if you could observe on the body cam, there were still several cars parked in the park as they were exiting the park. So to track somebody down who's already leaving a closed park was kind of crazy to begin with, but it was intentional, it was purposeful. So, anything else?
I think we'll watch the video then, and then I like the idea of thinking of how this is situated in the past and in the future. Where is policing in our present? Is it better? Is it worse? Are we on a path? And maybe Laurel can help talk about that too.
Okay. Are you being cooperative if I have you step out of the vehicle? Okay. Yeah, please do. That'd be great. Okay. I promise I'll be fair to you if you're fair to me. Sound good? Okay. And then I'm just gonna pat you down for weapons. Just put your hands on top of your head, just like I do for everybody.
You're saying no, Laurel?
Is that just your cell phone case? Oh, okay. Nothing in here. Can you spread your feet just a little bit? Okay. All right, come back and stand with me, okay? You're not gonna run from me, are you? We'll just hang tight back here. So you guys just smoking a little weed? It stinks like marijuana. So where do you work at? You said you work? I just. Okay. I promise not all cops are mean and rude. Look at me on this. We actually couldn't even see who was in the car. Well, so usually somebody, so when we stop people, we understand people are the drivers usually. Yeah, we ask a lot of people that. So here's what we're thinking. So when we pull up, usually a driver will get a little bit nervous because they're getting pulled over, so it's a little more nerve-wracking for them. Usually a passenger has nothing to be nervous about. As soon as I started talking to you, your heart rate, you could see it in your throat. as well as in your chest. You went from normal to almost hyperventilating to your throat is going, which usually means there's a gun in the car, there's a lot of drugs, or you have warrants. And we already know that there's some drugs. We've already talked about that, and your heart rate still wasn't going down. Right. And so then it's like, why are you still doing this? So then we have two things left. Are you wanted, or is there a gun in the car? You know, so those are our other two options why people get dead release. And so that's why we go to the gun thing. So you handed me your ID. So usually people with warrants don't give me their ID. That's not normal. So that's the last thing that we have. That's why we ask as many questions. You know? Because honestly, like, we have families. At the end of the night here in 49 minutes, I'm done. I'm going home to my spouse and my kids. I've got kids of my own that I'm trying to raise. And, you know, so we're just trying to do our job. The park closed like a half hour ago, and you guys were leaving the park, and then you didn't fully stop at the stop sign. So we checked it out. We couldn't see who was in the vehicle. It's too dark out. In a twilighty area, you can't see anything in the vehicle most times. You can relax your hands. You don't have to keep going. You can relax. I patted you down. I know you don't have to make your pocket. That's the same issue. Fireball, you drink that? Ooh. Yeah, burn your throat and everything else with it. So you gonna go to college? Yeah. Did you get a degree? What happened? Why did you stop going to college? How long did you go to college? You gotta apply for scholarships. Think about going back. Yeah. Oh, hold on just a second. Because college is how you're gonna be successful in life. How old did you say you are? He's got a nephew that's 23. And he had decided he didn't want to go to college. You know what he is now? A hard laborer. He lives down in Florida. And he works at a factory that does welding. And he literally takes the big pieces of metal and moves them for just over minimum wage. He wants to become a welder because it's good money, but he doesn't even want to go to trade school. He's too lazy. Like, dude, how are you gonna get the good paying job that pays like $30-some an hour as a welder if you don't go to trade school? And he's got his mom is single. You know? So, gotta go back to school. Look for all kinds of, what's a good gym, certain hygiene. Certain around, likes the light. It's gonna go and get him in the head, that's what it's gonna do. Yeah, but you should just Google like Google scholarships for African Americans, scholarships for African Americans with a single mom. So I have two brothers that are adopted. They're from Peru. They're Inca Indians. Like we Googled all like scholarships for Inca Indians. They found some. Like you can get all these little scholarships that you get $300 ones. Well, that's $3,000 of tuition. You just gotta Google it and gotta find them. Do the work. Usually after your second year, you get more scholarships anyway. What were you studying?
Business administration.
Oh. Go back to school and see what you work at Taco John's. Did you say Taco John? I want to work there for all your life. That'd be no fun. You seem like a nice kid. Don't get some nerves around us. We're actually close.
It's just the thing that I always do that I don't get, I stay in the house and I get in trouble.
Yeah. That's pretty fair.
I see stuff on the news all the time, just makes me nervous.
I tell you what, around here, we're all regular people just like you. You know, we all have families. Well, most of us have families. You know, whether it be a spouse or kids or whatever. You know, when we go home, we take up our uniform. We're regular people.
could have just been something a little bad, like a bad or something. Like, he jumped automatically to what?
To the bad things. All right, man.
Do you have any
See you later.
questions?
Get your degree. All right. All right, thank you guys.
What are some of the things that really struck you about this traffic stop? And Genesis, I was just wondering, because you're from Des Moines, you know, is this unexpected or expected?
I've never really had much opportunities to run in with law enforcement. The only way I've ever interacted was when I was shadowing at a paramedic that was attached to a police station. But I don't have many thoughts if I not interactions.
Going off from your question, I'm also from Des Moines, and I think that it was, for me, it's like really surprising to see because although especially also as a person of color, I do have experienced them and see that it's present in Des Moines, but it was definitely the level was very altercated and was really unexpected. It's a very minimal level that you usually see it in Des Moines, so to see that it has increased to that level was really surprising.
Do you want to talk about that too? Because I know this isn't your only son who has been stopped.
Yeah, my oldest son works for the state, lives downtown, and I don't know what it is about spoilers and black men in cars, but it draws a lot of attention. He has a small sporty car, it's not new, it's not fancy, but it does happen to have a spoiler on the back, so it draws a lot of attention for him. In that video, her go-to was, do you have weapons? Do you have drugs? Do you have warrants? Are you on parole, probation? Those are 5 things that pre-criminalizes people. And it marginalizes people and puts them in a position that you have to be a criminal at some point, rather than an interaction with another person that you're trying to get information. My son was fully aware of Philando Castile. Those of you who know, he was a passenger in a car in Minnesota who had a legal gun permit and was killed. So imagine if that was you, someone accusing you of having a weapon, being on probation, parole, a criminal in essence. George Floyd never got his day in court because he was pre-criminalized over the supposed counterfeit $20 bill, which is not enough to take a person's life for. So it's very dangerous. What we saw in this video is to assume that every black man carries a gun, every black man is a drug dealer, on parole, warrants, whatever. She asked for his ID, he gave it to him immediately. It did not stop the escalation on these 2 young men who were they were in a rental car. You can't smoke in a rental car, so they exited the vehicle. They were actually being responsible and not smoking in the car, so they got out, stopped at the park, smoked a cigarette, got back in the car, and that's when they were pulled over. So again, I know a lot about this stuff because we've studied it. They actually use it at the Sheriff's Department as a study model, kind of how not to be or not to get caught. But I can honestly say that some wins have come from this video. Now they can no longer stop you without identification. Either making a documentation, giving a warrant, they have to document every stop. This is what we would refer to as a ghost stop. It's not documented, it wasn't called into dispatch, therefore nobody knew that this stop even occurred had we not pursued it. So this happens a lot. It's a way of intimidating people and again causing problems with people who, we have a right to move around. It's our human right. And if they take his human rights away, then whose rights are next? So people ask, why should I care about what happened to your son? Well, right now it's my son, so maybe you don't care. But how will you feel when it's you? Will you feel that same way when they come for you? So we have to be in the fight. We have to call out these kind of harmful things that happen in communities to people unexpectedly, on purpose. It's not just systematic. What did you say it is?
It's strategic.
It's strategic. And I work with the grassroots organizations, and several of our city council members ran a racial profiling or anti-racial profiling ban platform. And they thought that would get them votes. They never saw our organization come in, who decided, oh, great, we need people on the council to help us get the police department reform, get some reform in there, get some accountability, some transparency, and make sure that the procedures and policies that they have are being followed and adhered to, because they are not supposed to have these things happen. In 2018, just prior to my son's stop, we had engaged our community, asked them to come out, support us, and out of that support, we came up with 6 anti-racial profiling ordinances. And when George Floyd's murder occurred, the council then called us and asked us how could they institute those 6 names we had been fighting for 2 years prior to George Floyd. Because the country was in an uproar, the planet was in an uproar. But people were in an uproar, they were trying to be, okay, now let's be reactive instead of being proactive in the 2 years that we had prior to George Floyd. But now it's a good time, and so we were like, yeah, we'll engage with that, we'll do that. So out of that came the implicit bias training. We actually had some problems where they gave that module, training module, to an officer that had several excessive force claims against him, almost to the tune of $1 million. We didn't think that was a good fit, so we complained about it until they got rid of him. So that was a win. We also needed de-escalation training for them. So these 6 ordinances all play an integral part of stopping racial profiling. And so there's lowering the priority of marijuana. There are 10,000 legal, I don't call them legal, but authorized users in Iowa that have their individual license. So I told the council on Monday that at any time, there could be 10,000 Iowans that smell like marijuana. So do we really want to invest our time in chasing the scent of marijuana? Then there were a couple of incidents in 2020 where the police officers were excessive. There were 5 city employees, females, that were sexually harassed by one of their coworkers. You may have heard about that. He happened to be the president of the police union. He was allowed to retire. Their lawsuit will go against the city. We, the taxpayers, will pay off his indiscretions, and he'll go on with his retirement. So we thought, because we couldn't get any answers as to how this was allowed to happen, we wanted a third-party investigation, and it took us about a year of going constantly and working with those council members that decided to work with us to get some of that transparency going. So they've agreed that they'll do a 7-month investigation of the Des Moines Police Department. $250,000 are going to spend on that investigation. It's independent. It is a 21st century policing going to do it. So that's another thing. And then as of last week, we found out immediately the procedure is, again, stopping any interaction that you give your ID or you're stopped for a reason. They have to identify, they have to document. So there won't be any more of these ghost stops. In Des Moines, blacks are 10% of the population, and that's kind of stretching. So we are more than 50% of the incarceration rate here. The math just doesn't add up. There was it was a special something team that kind of went into the communities. They called it the SET team. They disbanded that because it was very harmful to our community. So these are things that we're having happen. They seem minor to some people, but they're major. They really turn out to be major. The city wants accreditation for the police department, which is fine with us because in doing accreditation, a lot of the things we ask for are also part of it. So some good things have actually occurred from seeing what happens to young men. People generally believe that this doesn't happen. They must have been doing something drew the police's attention. But I'll also give you something that came out of the discovery from the stop. And there were these same two officers earlier in the evening, they stopped two white drivers going the wrong way on a one-way street. Both of them later they found out, both of those men were on probation and parole. They never searched their vehicle, nor did they have the passenger or the driver exit. Thies, the lead officer, the male officer, makes a comment on the video. If I search his car, we're all gonna be unhappy. So there's definitely biases going on here. And so it's easy to say, oh, that's just a day in the life. But when you see it so structured and intentional, it's harmful and it hurts. My son is on his second lawsuit and he won the right to pursue his case because they tried to use qualified immunity, which the governor says it's okay.
What does that mean?
That means that they're not, like your doctor malpractice stuff, you know, if they kind of botch some stuff, they're not gonna be held accountable because of their high profile jobs. Would you wanna see a physician that just had no accountability to you after he botched up your surgery? You know, you want a trained physician taking care of you, so I want my police to be safe too. I'm not anti-defund police. I wanna be able to call 911 when there is emergency. But I also want people to be treated as humans when they're stopped by the police department. That they don't have preconceived notions that anybody in here of color is a criminal just simply because. So we're gonna stay in the fight. As a matter of fact, we had kind of a celebratory mood last night at our local Y, to kind of go over some of the things that we've won, some of the things we're still fighting for, and just to kind of thank the community for supporting us back for the work that we're doing, honey. And are there any questions about what you saw here?
At the time of filming, was it like a law that they had to keep on their body cams?
Yes.
Okay.
Did you see him try to disconnect?
Yeah, I did, and I did especially after Seattle, where the Seattle Police Department is especially cruel, especially horrible in all of their interactions I've seen.
Yeah.
And it's a law there too, they have to have it on, but they are still able manually to turn it off all the time.
That's what the tap, I don't know, in his video, you can hear him really tapping,
Yeah.
really trying hard to disconnect that camera, and it didn't.
Yeah, so I'm just curious about, I guess, I'm not sure exactly how to phrase this question, or I guess it's like a vague idea, but like, when there are laws that are intended to hold the police accountable that can easily be, that are easily superable, or just can easily be disregarded by the police by means of personal intervention in areas where they're the only ones who are recording themselves or documenting their own behavior, but what do you think about that? Is there anything to be done about that, or?
Well, that's another part. Out of the 6-point ordinance came the community review board. And out of that community review board, they wanna follow the complaint process, because a lot of the complaints come back unfounded, simply because they don't care. I mean, once you file the complaint, it goes in the trash, unfounded, you never hear from them again. So there's really no complaint process. It really was, people would go in and found, it would be kind of like a good cop, bad cop situation where you're the complainant, but now you're on trial for, are you sure that really happened, you know, and really intimidating process to go through the complaint process. So our organization, CCI, does have people come into the office and they help them walk through the complaint process. So yes, there's a lot of work that needs to be done. They also did a survey of the city through Public Works, and there were 23 recommendations for simply just the police department to adhere to. And we're pushing to get those recommendations to, again, be adhered to. So there's transparency, you know, so it's gonna take work to get the police departments we want. We don't want a militia coming after us. We want peace officers, right? And I mean, their jobs are dangerous, and I have a niece that's thinking about going into law enforcement, and I'm proud of her, and I'm scared for her. So, we just happen to be in America where police they're part of our society now.
Whatever happened to those police officers? Were they punished in any way?
Weren't punished. But the female officer, for whatever reason we don't know, is no longer with the Lenore Police Department. About 6 months after the stop. And the male officer, we heard, is a detective, sort of. The reason I said sort of is because nobody really knows what he does. So, yeah. I heard that there's he's got some dirt on the police department, so they're trying to find a special place in heaven for him. So, and then last night it was just kind of nice having a police officer come and say to our group, thank you for what you're doing, because what you're doing is making a difference internally in our police department. So, although you think that people seem to think that we're against the police, but we're actually trying to help the way they operate in our city. And maybe we can be the example for other cities that we can have a working, just in Des Moines, I mean, we don't have a high murder rate. I mean, what did we have? 112 last year. Not saying there's not violence and there's not criminal activity and behavior, but when it comes to the spectrum, we're still on the low side. So we want our police safe just as equally as we want our citizens. Yes, ma'am.
Are the police not required to say why they pulled you over? I mean, the only hint I heard in there was that maybe they kind of rolled through a stop sign.
But
And then to be able to search a vehicle when they're not even telling you.
well,
Why
they
they pulled
thought he
over?
had a gun and it smelled of marijuana, which they never found any traces of marijuana in the vehicle.
And I don't know if anyone else felt this way, but the female, her words weren't objectionable, but I felt bombarded.
Very condescending.
Yeah, yeah.
And this, your mom's single. Well, yeah, I'm a single mom, but I lost my husband. He died. So it wasn't a choice. It was simply life, and it occurred. And the way she kept talking about her own nephew, to me, was horrible. I would hate for that to be my aunt talking about me on film about how lazy I am simply because I have a manual labor job. We need manual laborers. Who will carry that sheet of metal? We need them to be paid accordingly so that they're making a living wage.
That she used the pay scale.
The pay scale, and that he was lazy, and that's hard work. So,
And who's cleaning up after our disasters? You know?
Right, you know, and to be that demeaning about somebody working at Taco Bell, I'm sure she's driven through the window of Taco Bell and ordered tacos. So if somebody's not there to make her tacos, how's she gonna eat? So her whole spectrum about, you know, people and what it takes to run a society. I mean, somebody's gotta cook the food, somebody's gotta plant the food. If my children wanted a chicken killed from they're just gonna eat vegetables because it's never gonna happen for me. So we have to have workers and we have to respect the work that they do simply because it's not our path, it's not what we do, we're the consumers. And I think sometimes we forget about consumerism of the things that we take for granted. So it's hard to see that the way she acted and to know that she's a paid employee of the city. Yes.
And then also seeing the manner that they came up to them and started talking to them, especially as somebody who had to work with like at a hospital and a patient, that's like something that just like, that's like a big no-no. And then we have a whole bunch of classes talking about how to interact with people if like, if they are combative or like how to de-escalate the situation and stuff. And seeing them not being that type of person, but actually escalating the situation with their manner of words and tones, it was just very shocking.
So the people that were actually the criminals were not the people with the guns. I mean, the people with the guns were actually the criminals, excuse me. And they were sued behind this. But we have rights, and we have rights not to be stopped or hindered. So you're absolutely right. But for an outside entity to have to say to them, you need to learn to de-escalate, that needs to be part of your training when you become a police officer.
There was also, you reminded me of something I thought just this time watching when they first approached the vehicle. The police officer, she seemed to lie because she said, we couldn't even see what race you were. And then she said a minute later, we saw you in the park, and how could you not see somebody's race if they're in the park and you follow them and you watch them get in the car? So she, I don't know if anyone, this is off topic, if anyone saw Yellow Submarine back in the day, it's the Beatles film, you saw it, well, there's the blue meanies, and the real criminal person talks just like this police officer, very measured, careful, and it feels like she's exploding with rage inside. You know, you've got that feeling from her, that all her power was pent in.
Yeah, to have someone's ID, which is the first thing she got from him. He follows through with, I'm going to exit the car, but did you see how he undid the seatbelt?
Yeah, he asked for permission.
Yeah, how awkward that is when we undo our seatbelts, we usually reach across. He tells her, my lighter's in my lap, so it's gonna hit the ground, you're gonna hear a bang. Don't shoot me, in essence, is what she's saying. He's saying, don't kill me because this lighter falls out of my lap. She asked him, what were you reaching for? He said, my phone fell on the ground. If they could see shake on the ground, they should have been able to see his phone. So the officer on the other side is telling the driver there's shake on the ground. There's absolutely no way, standing where he was, he saw anything on the ground. That car is a compact, it was too tight. That guy's over 6 foot tall. So there was no way he saw anything in his car. So, again.
Was it easy for you to get this footage? I asked that knowing the answer.
No. She went on vacation for 2 weeks because she never thought this was gonna come up. They didn't want me to have his because, well, he didn't really talk to my son. And I'm like, no, it was an interaction I need to be able to look at. And it was honest what I wanted it for, is because I needed to feel like whatever he did to look like he was holding a gun, I need to tell his brothers, don't look like that. Don't do whatever he did because I don't need you to get shot accidentally. So it was part of a training. I needed to see visually what he was doing. And then I was even more appalled to find out he simply had his hands on his knees. So it was exaggerated. I don't know if you get a chance to see Montre's video, but you should have been able to see Montre from her angle, her camera, and hear Thief saying, "I don't know what you're doing, but you need to stop." He was absolutely still, mannequin still. So it's that kind of pressure. Can you imagine being in that boiler and not have your carotid artery just like thumping, like, why are you scared? Well, you just accused me of having a gun. I don't have a gun. But I know people accused of being, having guns have been killed by police officers. It's just a reality. I hate that it's a reality, but it is a reality. So I'm telling you, if somebody accused me of having a gun, knowing they had theirs already unholstered, and they're accusing me of that, yeah, I'm gonna be nervous. And then for her to basically say, well, you're just nervous for nothing. Your nervousness makes me nervous. Yeah. Well, you accusing me of having a gun makes me pretty nervous. And so, it was.
And you also told me about the medical inaccuracy about the throat.
Oh yeah, there was a young lady that was in Lenore's class, and we showed this video, and they do body language. And she said that they each took a piece of it and watched the video, and she was saying that the body language was off, and that experts, only 20% of experts get the carotid artery right. And unless she was a trained expert, she was way off. So it's another form of intimidation and, to throw somebody off. They're not your friends, to be honest. Don't be fooled by that they're really not your friends in a stop. And it's best not to try to challenge them if you can avoid it. Challenge it in court if you feel like you've been violated. Fifth Amendment is something I encourage my children to use often. You have to verbalize it. You can't just be silent. You have to say, I want to invoke my Fifth Amendment rights to remain silent. I'll give you my driver's license. I'll give you my insurance papers, pertinent information, but don't try to tell them. If they ask you why you were stopped, I don't know, you tell me. But if you try to tell them, then they can entrap you with whatever your answer is. Oh, I know I didn't mean to speed, we want to kind of they're not your friends. They're not your friends in a stop. So the best is to cooperate as best you can, get home safely. If you can get the videos, most times it's out of the system in 30 days. If it's just for your own peace of mind, $25 every 15 minutes of the video you get. Get that video, look at it with your family. Talk about, was my posture wrong? What do you think I could have done differently? But these are things that I think families should actually talk about so that future generations understand that traffic stops for Black people can be deadly and dangerous, and it's scary to be a parent. The talks I have to have with my son are love and fear. Love and fear, and that hurts me too. That I have to talk to him like that, but it has to be honest. I don't care what they tell you. My son was in that position because he didn't want to spook her any more than she was already spooked. And to be behind him with a gun and then ask him, you're not gonna run off. Why would I? You got my address, you have my ID, you know where I'm gonna live, where I live at, you know where to find me. But you ask me if I'm gonna run off. That would have been dangerous for my son to do. So again, more intimidation, more power structure, and
Yeah, and talking about power structure, I think that's really a key, because, you know, when you're talking about, you tell your children what they should do, and what they could do wrong. But the power structure is that it's like what you said, they're already pre-criminalized because of what they can't control, which is skin color. So, what my question is to people in the class and others, why should white people care? Does this affect us as white people? How? Because you go through so much to try and have your children be safe, yourself be safe, and I think I've heard, you know, that this is true for every black family. What about white people? Is this anything that affects us?
I think the obvious answer is yes. It's kind of like a bystander effect. You're watching it happen, and even though you're not involved, you are involved in some way. But to the effect, I'm not quite sure.
So you feel like it's not just empathy, oh, that's happening to them, but you are involved. But how? Were you? Oh, Isabel.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like, unfortunately, a lot of times, people who kind of act or think like the officers in this video are more likely to listen to other white people and take them more seriously, which sucks, but it's like people, and I guess if it takes a white person to say it to them, then be that person, because otherwise you're just like letting it continue.
I'm also thinking, and I got struck again listening to you talk today, and that, you know, I did think, like, yes, white people, we hear the word allies a lot, but selfishly, this is affecting our lives too, so we have to speak up, because do you really want people like that with guns? And if they show that kind of power over black people, they can use any excuse to show it over white people. And so having those people in society, in positions of power, is dangerous to everybody. It's not, oh, we're safe. This is a sign of something terribly wrong. I have to exit for 1 second. Any other questions? I'm not a scary person, come on, it helps.
So as a layperson, you're able to get those videos from the police?
Absolutely, absolutely. You don't necessarily have to be the person involved. Last Saturday, well, the 13th, was it last Saturday? I purchased an ambulance to convert. If you guys are part of the van life, you guys know what I'm talking about. So her name's Molly, and she's kind of cool. So sitting in Molly Saturday night, just kind of sitting, I witnessed a stop. Happened to be an Uber car driver who was white. And of course, the stop and sniff tests always happen. The passenger seated in the back was black. I couldn't understand in the traffic stop why they were so focused in on this passenger. And I'm thinking, is there a baby back there? My mind's kind of like, what's going on? Well, as it turns out, it was a young black guy sitting back there, just getting off work. So they pull him from the car. He's immediately handcuffed and put in a patrol car. And I'm thinking, what the heck did this guy do? Then they avert their attention back to the driver, who I can hear won't get out of the car. They're like, get out, no. Get out of the car, no. So this is going back and forth. Well, he's dealing with a rookie cop because he's got his ball cap on. He's kind of asking, why won't you get out of the car? I've done everything that gets you out of the car. Why won't you get out of the car? And he's pleading with this guy to get out of the car. And I'm thinking, whose grandmother is driving this car? You know, I can see a woman being a little belligerent, not wanting to get out of the car. Two police, well, the rookie cop's got a trainer trailing him, so he's there. And so the person just will not exit the vehicle. And so they call the sergeant. Sergeant walks up 3 times. The 4th time he says, "You're not in any trouble, just get out of the car." And the person exits, which turns out to be a white guy. And I'm thinking, you guys sat here and begged this guy to get out of the car. Well, as it turns out, he had a weapon, he had a gun. They search the passenger's backpack and find an immeasurable amount of marijuana. They can't even measure it on the scale. But he's in the back of the car, he's handcuffed. The driver gets out, he's got cigarettes and a lighter in his hand. He sets it up on the police car, lights a cigarette while they're frisking him. He's so comfortable, he's smoking a cigarette, okay? And I'm thinking, oh, okay, well, he got a gun. Reason I know he's got a gun is they're chastising him. You can have a gun in Iowa without a permit, but it has to be open, carried. His was concealed. That was illegal. Never placed in handcuffs. He stands back. "Did the guy put anything in your trunk?" "Nope, nothing in the trunk." They search the trunk, find an unopened can of beer, which to my delight, they chuck in my garbage can. And so I say to the officer, "Sir, what did you just throw in my garbage?" "Oh, it was a can of beer." I said, was it closed?" "Well, yeah, it wasn't open." I said, "Well, you'll need to get that out. Take it with you." "Well, why? It wasn't open." This is the sergeant. I said, "Sir, I have kids that dumpster dive in my neighborhood. I really don't want kids getting a hold of closed beer in my garbage can off of my property. Please take that with you." So he has to dumpster dive, which was kind of enjoyable. I want you to go through my trash. But what I want you to understand is that they never thought about the fact that the last 2 officers killed in Iowa was by a white man. He was apprehended, taken to the hospital. We knew he had a gun. They treated him very kind and gingerly. To me, they're setting their own officers up for danger because you're more interested in a black man with an unmeasurable amount of marijuana being the criminal. You failed to understand that you had a guy who's breaking the law with a gun. So that's more harmful to our community is the oversight of a white man being okay with a gun. But the black man is the criminal with the smell of marijuana. So it's those kind of biases that we have to eradicate. Not only in our police department, but in our own thinking. You know, so it's out there, it happens, and what happens to your neighbor, like I said, it could eventually be you in that position. So think about it, see how biases play in our society. And how you guys are the next generation, and it's your kids and their kids that will carry on. How do you want the next society to be? Do you want it to be better than what we have or worse? So it's now, before you guys start, you know, making more people, that you get to decide how you want those people to be.
To obtain that footage, I'm just curious, did you have to invoke the Freedom of Information Act, or did you have to invoke the Freedom of Information Act to get that footage, or how did you go about obtaining
I
it?
just called down there, and asked them how to get video body cameras.
Okay, gotcha.
I think if it's not you and you're not involved, you do have to do the FOIA.
Okay, gotcha.
So think about it. There's a lot on the ballot box this time around.
I was gonna ask, for the Iowa voters in the room, could you talk a minute about the amendment that?
For the guns.
Yeah.
Yeah, lawless gun acts, where they just don't want any accountability for gun owners, and they stretch the Second Amendment right to just, you can see through it. The reason I got involved back in 2017, Iowa enacted the Stand Your Ground, which really changes things, because there's kind of a clause in there that you don't necessarily have to be accurate, that you were in harm's way when you kill somebody. And they just don't want any sense and sensibility about guns. And to me, the way that amendment is written, I think I have it on, somebody sent it to me. You guys can think about, do we wanna go back to the wild, wild west where things are settled in the street at dusk? Two people dueling over a disagreement because everybody's gonna have to have a gun in order just to live, I mean, because everybody else has a gun. So, do we really wanna go down that path? I can read it to you real quick if anybody wants to hear it. Because it's on the ballot, it's something we're gonna have to decide as Iowans if we really want that kind of, I think it's not accountability. I happen to have a permit, which I keep, simply because I wanna be above the law as a responsible gun owner. Yes, ma'am.
Isn't it, like the amendment, isn't it kind of like hidden on the back ballot also?
Yeah, it's kind of tricky. It says summary, provide that the right of the people of Iowa to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. The sovereign state of Iowa affirms and recognizes the right to keep and bear arms as a fundamental right. Any and all restrictions of this right shall be subject to strict scrutiny. It says Article 1 of the Constitution of the State of Iowa is amended by adding the following new section. Right to keep and bear arms, Section 1A. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. The sovereign state of Iowa affirms, recognizes the right, and just repeats that. So that could be a felon, a dangerous felon, could skirt that with that simple amendment. So that means everybody. Didn't that sound like everybody can have a gun? You know, there was a,
I just want to introduce special guest, Mrs. Helen Miller, and she was the state representative for Fort Dodge.
okay.
For how many years? 16 years. So, welcome to you, Helen.
So yeah, that's on the ballot. And I'm hoping Iowans are smart enough to see it, but when they got the Stand Your Ground to go through, they used two examples. One was a black guy that shot at these two people that were chasing at him. So they used him for that. And then there were two little 12-year-old girls who wanted to be competitor shooters or whatever. And they used them because the legal age at that time was 14 and they were 12. So they wanted to amend that bill. They called it the toddler bill. They want to talk about the response time in rural communities, why everybody should have a gun. So everybody's not responsible with guns, I'm sorry. And there should be some restrictions. I feel, that's just my personal feeling. So we'll see what comes out of the ballot, but it made it to the ballot because they had enough signatures to get it on there. And some of the legislators that lead the gun bills actually own gun shops and gun manufacturers. So it's really to their advantage that they sell guns. It's not to our advantage, it's to their advantage to make money and profit. So it's really, you have to think about who's leading the charge and why, so. It's scary, but this is where we're going. I'd rather we not turn that clock back, so. Any other questions?
Is the Iowa CCI building, is that one next to, it's like Pleasant Street or?
It's right here on Forest and
Oh.
MLK.
Okay, I don't think you would have, I never mind that, yeah.
Stop, feel free to stop in anytime. They're just a great group of organizers in there.
And we've had Drake students who have been employed there.
Yeah.
So,
Absolutely.
so it's a
Just,
good place.
yeah, just the front door is always open. It looks like a grocery store. Used to be a bar when I was a young person, but really great group of grassroots. They work on healthcare and farming issues. Water's life. Our factory farmers are killing our water supply here. So we work on a lot of things, not just racial justice, but climate justice and energy and healthcare and stuff, so.
Well, thank you so much, Laura. It's always.
And if you have any questions for me later, please have Lenore funnel through me. I'm happy to come back and answer questions. If you want to see the second video, it's called The Stop
And is it available
on YouTube.
So, yeah, definitely look at that other video as
Yeah,
well.
Art Clinton, and you can kind of see the stress that the driver goes through. And he's had some issues too, post-stop, that we're really hoping that he gets some support help for, but.
Yeah, the consequences to the people who are stopped, we didn't even talk about that, but.
Yeah, it's an unfortunate trauma, and, yeah, it has to be stopped.